Ever feel like you have this like internal engine that's just stuck on overdrive? Even when you're trying to, relax. That's kind of what we're diving into today, the wild world of hyperactive impulsive ADHD in adults.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, right? Because most people, they hear ADHD, they think kids, but for some people that boundless energy, it doesn't really go away.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to unpack today. We know you're here to learn more about it. Maybe you're prepping for a meeting, or maybe it's personal, or hey, maybe you're just curious. Whatever the reason, we've got you covered.
I think what's really fascinating about this topic is how differently ADHD actually presents. You
Right.
know, like you said, it's not just a childhood thing.
Right.
And really recognizing those signs, those nuances of hyperactive impulsive ADHD, that's key. That's key to getting the right support, the right strategies. And that's what we're going to be kind of unpacking today.
Yeah, and speaking of those signs, I was actually reading through some of the research, and one line really stuck with me. It talked about this internal motor that never stops running.
Oh, yeah.
It's such a vivid description, isn't it? You can almost hear the whirring.
Yeah, and it gets to like the core of how this is different from just, being a little energetic or fidgety. Hyperactive impulsive ADHD, it's a neurodevelopmental difference, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about impulsivity, restlessness, this real difficulty with self-control as if something's driving you, this force you can't quite rein in.
Right. And that makes total sense. Now, I know you mentioned the inattentive type of ADHD earlier. How can someone really tell the difference between the two? I imagine there's got to be some overlap,
Right,
right?
absolutely, yeah. And that is a super important distinction to make. Okay, let me try to paint a picture here.
Okay.
Someone with inattentive ADHD, they might struggle to, let's say, focus on a really detailed report, or maybe they get lost in their thoughts or miss deadlines because they're just totally overwhelmed with organization.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But someone with the hyperactive impulsive type, they might start 15 different tasks, jump between them all rapidly, interrupt colleagues during a conversation, and then suddenly feel this urge to like sprint to the coffee machine.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Both fall under that ADHD umbrella, absolutely. But the way they show up, the challenges they bring, and even the support that's needed, it's all very unique.
Yeah. Those examples really make it clear how different they are. And speaking of challenges, it makes you think, like, diagnosis must be tricky sometimes, right?
You're hitting on a really, really critical point.
Yeah.
Our source actually mentioned that anxiety, certain mood disorders, even just personality quirks, they can all kind of look like ADHD.
Oh, wow.
That's why it's so important to have a real comprehensive evaluation by someone who knows what they're doing, a qualified professional.
Yeah.
You can only get so far with self-diagnosis, wouldn't you say?
100%. Yeah. I mean, this isn't just about labels, right? We're talking real life stuff here, work, relationships, those everyday experiences. So how does hyperactive impulsive ADHD actually impact those areas?
Well, think about it this way. Impulsive decisions, constantly interrupting conversations, always feeling on edge, that can really put a strain on relationships, right?
Right.
Our source actually talks about someone who can't even enjoy a simple dinner with friends. They're constantly bouncing their leg, their mind's racing ahead. A lot of us can relate to that feeling of restlessness sometimes, even without ADHD.
And it makes you think about, like, the workplace, right?
Yeah.
Especially with those feelings of being overwhelmed, which our source talks about. It's like, how do you even function when you've got this constant internal restlessness?
It's a slippery slope for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
burnout city, but it's not all doom and gloom, right? There are actually some really good strategies out there to help regain that control. And our source, they actually highlight the importance of routine, which I think is so key.
Yeah.
Because it's like this external anchor.
Yeah.
It gives you structure to kind of counteract that inner whirlwind that's going on.
Right.
Another thing that they mention, and I think this is really helpful for a lot of people, is breaking down tasks. So instead of having this like massive insurmountable thing, you break it down into smaller, more manageable chunks.
Yeah, it's like you're creating a roadmap for your brain to follow.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. Instead of just letting it zoom off in all directions, you're like, okay, we're going to go here, then we're going to go here.
Yeah, exactly. And I know our source also mentioned this CareClinic app, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Is that kind of, does that play into that whole like breaking it down routine?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And what I appreciate about this source
Mm-hmm.
is they're very clear that it's not like a replacement, right?
Right.
It's not a magic solution.
It's like a sidekick.
Exactly, exactly. It's just one tool in the toolbox.
Yeah.
Right. And they emphasize that a lot, this idea that, managing hyperactive impulsive ADHD, it's not just one thing.
Yeah.
It's medication, it's therapy, it's lifestyle changes. It's this whole, like, multi-pronged approach.
And that actually makes me feel kind of optimistic. It's not hopeless. There are things you can actually do, concrete steps. So if someone's listening and thinking, this sounds a lot like me, where do they even begin? What does that journey actually look like?
Well, like I was saying, it's multi-pronged.
Right.
Right. So as you can imagine, it's going to require, like, a multifaceted solution.
Mm-hmm.
But the way our source breaks it down, I think it's really helpful. They talk about three main areas. So we've got medication, therapy, and then those lifestyle changes we were just discussing. And we can dive a little deeper into each of those if you'd like.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so first up, meditation. And of course, big disclaimer here, we are not doctors. This is not medical advice,
Of course. Yeah.
just information. But basically, there are medications that can help regulate certain neurotransmitters in the brain, right?
Okay.
Those are the chemical messengers that affect things like attention and impulse control.
So it's not just about like popping a pill and calling it a day, right? This is about working with like a healthcare professional to find what works for you.
Absolutely. 100%. This is a partnership, right? It's not a DIY situation.
Right, right. Okay, so we've got medication, then what about therapy? What did the source say about that?
Well, they actually highlight something called cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT,
Okay.
which they say is particularly effective for hyperactive impulsive ADHD.
And what is it about CBT that makes it so effective?
Well, the cool thing about CBT is it's not about just masking those symptoms,
Right.
It's about actually giving you the tools, the skills to manage those racing thoughts, those impulsive urges. Like you're kind of retraining your brain in a way.
So it's like it kind of lines up with that learner aspect, wouldn't you say?
Totally.
Where it's about understanding the why behind it all and making like conscious choices rather than just like putting a Band-Aid on the problem.
Exactly, exactly. You're not just passively receiving treatment, right? You're actively participating in changing your thought patterns, which I think is so powerful.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we've got meds, we've got therapy. What's that third piece of the puzzle? This is where the CareClinic app comes back in, right?
Exactly. We're talking lifestyle changes.
Yeah.
And, our source, they're very clear about this. These are not just some optional extras.
Yeah.
This is where the real game changers are. And they talk about things like regular exercise, which makes a huge difference
Okay.
because it's an outlet for all that excess energy,
Yeah.
right? And it does wonders for focus.
It's like like you said, giving your internal motor a designated track to run on
Yes.
instead of just letting it go crazy all day.
Exactly, yeah. You're harnessing that energy. And then, like we were talking about before, the power of routine, right? That structure, it helps minimize decision fatigue because that can be a real struggle with this type of ADHD. And it actually reduces those opportunities for those impulsive choices.
Okay. And how does the CareClinic app play into all this? Because it seems like it kind of complements all those lifestyle changes really well.
That's exactly it. It's like having like a little coach in your pocket, right? It gives you reminders to take your medication. It helps you track your symptoms so you can start to see those patterns, even things like scheduling appointments so you don't forget.
It's like a little personalized support system right there on your phone. I love it. So, someone's listening to this and they're like, wow, this is me. This sounds so familiar. What would you say, like, what's a good first step for them to take?
Honestly, the most important thing is to talk to a professional. Someone who can actually, like, really assess whether ADHD is a factor, and if so, what type, right? Because like we were talking about earlier, self-diagnosis, it's tricky. And while it's totally understandable that someone might, hear this and relate to it, it's not a replacement for an actual evaluation.
100%. And hey, we're all about, informed curiosity here, but we definitely don't want to be giving out armchair diagnoses or anything like that.
Exactly, yeah.
Speaking of which, this whole deep dive has really highlighted the importance of support networks for me.
Oh, huge, yeah.
Because whether it's, friends, family, maybe some online communities, having those people who understand, really get the unique challenges that come with specifically hyperactive impulsive ADHD, I mean, that's got to be invaluable.
Totally. Because it gives you a space to, actually share what you're going through. You can trade coping strategies and honestly just realizing you're not alone in all this.
Yeah.
That can make a world of difference.
Totally. Sometimes just knowing that other people get it is all you need.
Absolutely. It's like that saying, right? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
I love that.
And Managing ADHD, especially this type, it's definitely a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
So having that team, those people in your corner makes a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive here, what's like the one key takeaway you want our listeners to walk away with today?
You know, I think the biggest thing is just to remember that there's always hope and there's always help available. Adult ADHD, particularly the hyperactive impulsive type, it can feel incredibly isolating. But once you understand it, once you have those tools and you've got that support system in place,
Yeah.
you can not only manage it, you can thrive.
It's about moving from just like surviving to really thriving.
Exactly.
And remembering that, hey, you don't have to go through it alone.
100%.
There are resources, strategies, a whole community out there ready to support you every step of the way.
Absolutely.
And on that note, we'll leave you with plenty to, think about, maybe do a little exploring of your own. And until next time, keep diving deep and keep those internal engines running smoothly.